Look, I know everybody is talking about the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max this year, but I am telling you, the iPhone 15 is a big upgrade over the iPhone 14. Welcome everybody, welcome to Apple Insider. It is Andrew here, and I have my iPhone 14 and my iPhone 15, and I'm excited to walk you through, hands-on, all of the differences between these two phones. And I am not kidding, this is probably one of the bigger upgrades in Apple's base models. Apple's put a lot of tech from the iPhone 14 Pro into the iPhone 15, so you're getting a lot of Pro tech in the entry-level phones. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, including benchmarks and camera performance. It's a lot. So use the chapter markers down below if you need to skip to different sections, and let's go ahead and just dive into this. Let's start with the design. These both definitely have an iPhone aesthetic. There's no mistaking these for other smartphones. But the new iPhone 15 definitely has a mildly updated aesthetic. I mean, it for sure feels nicer in the hand. I mean, I love the new kind of matte back they put on here. The sides are just slightly more rounded, so it just nestles into your hand a little bit more. It's not so sharp against your pinky when you're kind of like holding them. Seriously, you get like this little like notch like in your pinky because it's so sharp with these squared off edges. But the new one just nestles in there so nicely. I love it. So you get the matte back, rounded off sides a little bit more. It definitely just feels nicer. It feels thinner and lighter. It technically is thinner, or technically is lighter, but it's not really much, thinner in any of the other dimensions. It just feels like it because of the way that the design has been ever so slightly tweaked. The iPhone 15 comes in several new colors that are all just very muted, except for black. So here I have the blue, Apple does call this very light one blue. I also have the black version in the 15 Plus, so everything for the 15 applies to the 15 Plus. The new iPhone is available in this blue and black that you see here, but also green, yellow, and pink if those are more your style. Of course, on the front of phones, you're going to find the display. And there actually was a few display changes this year, though there's still no 120 Hz ProMotion. It's still a 6.1-inch display, but it's just slightly larger. We're talking increasing the resolution from 2532 by 1170 to 2556 by 1179. A very small increase in the actual resolution, and we're keeping the same pixel density of 460 ppi. Looking at the screens, they basically look the same. I mean, the density again is the same, so you're not going to notice like any more crisp. It's not going to be a high refresh rate, but it does just go closer to the edges. You can definitely see the smaller bezels on the 15 compared to the 14. Apple did increase the brightness of the display, so before the iPhone 14 had a typical brightness of about 800 and 1200 when you were using peak brightness during HDR playback. The iPhone 15 now has typical brightness of 1000, but it can reach 1600 for its peak during HDR playback, and when it's outside, it can go all the way up to 2000 nits, which means using the iPhone 15 in the sun is much better, at least for trying to see the display. Of course, the iPhone 15 also has the dynamic island. You get all the nice benefits of the dynamic island, all the different animations and all that other stuff. It's very lovely. I very much like the dynamic island. I've had it on the 14 Pro for a year, and now that it's come to the 15, I still like it. It's still a really cool way to keep up with things, whether it's scores of, hockey game. We're back in hockey season now, whether it's your fantasy football stuff. Like, all this stuff can show in the dynamic island, and I like it quite a lot. Then we have connectivity. Not much has changed connection-wise. The 15 Pro and Pro Max did get more options. The Pro series has Thread and Wi-Fi 6E, but we're sticking with Wi-Fi 6 on the 14 and the 15s. We also have the same Bluetooth 5.3. The two connectivity changes that Apple did make, though, was Apple has a new second-generation ultra-wideband chip. Not the U2, that's the band. Apple is just calling it a second-generation ultra-wideband chip. The new second generation ultra wideband chip has 3 times the range of the original U1 chip. It also allows you to do cool things like find other people with new iPhones. So if you're at a farmer's market, you're at a fair, you are at an amusement park, and you are trying to find your significant other or your child, you can now use precision finding. You can see how far they are ahead of you and literally track them down like an AirTag. It's very helpful for trying to find your family or friends in those busy, crowded situations. You know someone is in the rough proximity, but you can't exactly spot them. The new U2 or second generation ultra wideband chip will help that. Then, of course, we have USB-C. So it is a USB-C port which allows for universal charging between all of your different accessories. Plug your camera in, plug your iPhone in, plug your AirPods in, whatever it is, you can all use USB-C, and it's quite handy. But Apple did limit the USB-C port. It's still the same 480 megabits per second data transfer rate that we had for Lightning. It's not the faster speeds that we're seeing on the Pros, but charging, everything else, is going to be the same. It's just really kind of nice to have USB-C. By the way, since we're talking about the charging port, battery life is still the same here on the iPhone 15 series. For the 15, Apple says you're going to get about 20 hours of video playback time. It's the same as on the 14. That brings us to my favorite part of this, the cameras. One of the biggest limiting factors of the base iPhones is that Apple will only give you two lenses. It gives you an ultra-wide lens and your standard wide-angle lens, your main lens. But with the iPhone 15, Apple kept that the same, but it has greatly upgraded that primary wide-angle sensor. Now Apple's gone from a 12 megapixel to a 48 megapixel. So not only are we going to get better standard shots, Apple also allows you to get 2 times optical quality zoom. So now the iPhone 15 has essentially a 0.5 ultra-wide lens, a 1 times wide-angle lens, and a 2 times digital optical quality zoom lens. Very, very handy. Because it does give you 2 times optical quality zoom, Apple even allows you to zoom in further with digital zooms. Now you can get up to 10 times digital zoom on the iPhone 15 compared to only 5 times digital zoom on the iPhone 14. That main lens now defaults to 24 megapixels, which is a big difference. I think we should probably look at some sample photos between these two, and you'll start to understand the difference of how important that primary sensor is. Okay, so here we have both of the phones. On the right-hand side is the iPhone 15, on the left is the iPhone 14. Here's just a basic photo shot with that main sensor all the way zoomed out, so just 1 time zoom. And they both look pretty solid. It looks a little bit lighter here on the iPhone 15, but other than that, they both look like good photos. But what happens when we look at the details? I mean, when we zoom up on this first pumpkin stem, this is still that original shot. This part here, it's just all blurry. It's a mess. There's barely any definition, any of that. The stem, they've tried to kind of just blend everything together. There's just no definition in the photo. You can see how much more clear this is. This is so much more. If you wanted to crop this in, you actually could. And that's that's a lot of zoom on this photo. This next shot is shot at 2 times, so 2 times optical quality here on the iPhone 15 and just 2 times digital zoom here on the iPhone 14. Again, there's a big difference. Look at the stem on this pumpkin. It's just a blurry mess here on the iPhone 14, 15. There's so much more detail here. Even just looking at these letters, the E, those little scratch marks are crisp on the iPhone 15, whereas they're not on the iPhone 14. I will say there's a little bit more noise in the iPhone 15 here. You can see in the red. It looks a little blotchy compared to this one, but part of it is just this phone is lighter. These are set similar brightness levels because the display is so much brighter. It just comes across as a lot lighter, but in real life, they're very similar. Just a brighter display here on the iPhone 15. I will admit, though, that just because you have further zoom doesn't mean it's always beneficial to zoom all the way in. So this is up at 10 times zoom versus 5 times zoom. And yeah, at this point, they do look pretty solid. Everything looks pretty great there. But when we start to zoom in closer, take a look at the stem of this pumpkin. Again, it's 5 times versus 10 times, but the 15, there's nothing going on here. This is a mess on the stem of this pumpkin, where it actually looks decent here at 5 times. So this is not great, but you're looking at basically kind of 10 times zoom versus 5 times zoom on that one sensor. So there's going to be a little bit of loss of quality there, but I'm glad that you have 10 times as an option. And as long as you're not trying to crop it in further, it is not a bad camera to use. Finally, one last shot to take a look at, again, highlighting the benefits of that 48 megapixel primary sensor shooting at 24 megapixels. So mums on both. Mums look great here on each of these shots, but let's get closer. If you can see the difference in these actual blossoms, the iPhone 15, you can see the individual petals where they start to blend kind of together on the iPhone 14. There's just not a ton of definition around those individual petals. And that's because this is, again, a higher resolution shot, 24 megapixels shot on that 48 megapixel sensor. It's going to give you better detail in these photos. Again, look at these, so crisp and sharp versus whatever this is. It's just blurry. Blurry, blurry, blurry. If we zoom out, you don't notice much of a difference. Both are solid shots. You're not going to be sad with this camera, but This one gives you a lot more options, more cropping potential, just so much more that you can do with it. Apple also claims to have next level portrait photos on the new iPhone 15 series. What that means is that you can use your phone to capture a live photo, but if your phone detects a person, a cat, or a dog, it's going to automatically capture depth data. Now, let's just take a second or so to kick in. Like if you pull open your camera and take a picture right away, it may not have time to capture that depth data or recognize what's in the shot, but as long as you give it just like a second to realize there's a person, a cat, or a dog, it will capture depth data. So you can go ahead and look at that photo after the fact, and you're like, hey, this is great as a live photo because my dog happened to be jumping and it was really cute, or my baby was doing something and I want to watch it as a live photo. Or you think, oh my gosh, this is a wonderful shot, I just want to be able to use portrait mode. And you can just turn on that portrait effect, add on the portrait lighting and that background blur and adjust it as much as you need. It's super cool. Here's an example with my son. We were out at like a picnic, so of course I want live photos. He's moving around, jumping, climbing on hay bales. I'm keeping on live photos, but now because it's automatically able to detect that it's a person in that shot, it captured that depth data. So I can use this as a live photo. I can see him moving up and down, or I'm like, hey, this is a cool photo. Let's see what it looks like as a portrait shot. And I can go up to that top left corner, drop down and choose portrait mode, and enable that background bokeh, change the lighting effects. This is a game changer. By far one of my favorite features coming to the iPhone 15 series. Running each of these phones is a different processor. Apple was using the A15 Bionic processor on the iPhone 14 and 14 Plus. The iPhone 15 and 15 Plus got the A16 Bionic processor. That's the same processor that was found in the iPhone 14 Pro. So the Pro processor came down to this entry-level phone, and Apple introduced a new A17 Pro processor for the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. But still, this is a big upgrade in terms of performance for the iPhone 15. The first thing I had to do was run Geekbench 6, and there was a significant upgrade here. So on the single core score, we are looking at a 2302 that now went to a 2622. On the multi-core, we saw a 1,000-point gain with about 20%, so a 5690 to a 6649. I'm pretty darn happy with that. I mean, this isn't the Pro phone by any means, but we're still seeing like a 20% improvement here. Like, that's a solid improvement, especially considering that the A17 Pro processor upgrade isn't quite as much as we hoped that it would be. For the GPU score, we went from a 20862 to a 22714. Not as big of an upgrade, but definitely still welcomed. When I ran the Antutu benchmark, the biggest upgrades here that we saw in this breakdown was for both the CPU as well as the memory. Those two saw the biggest improvements in their actual performance. GPU is technically a little bit lower. I don't think it's actually lower. It just could be the benchmark rating. I bet if I ran this a few more times, it would end up pretty similar, or if not a little bit of a gain. But the GPU didn't change that much. Neither did the UX there. CPU, memory, both nice upgrades. Finally, on the machine learning benchmark, Geekbench ML, we went from a 911 to an 1109, 10% or so of an upgrade there. Again, there's a lot of attention on the 15 Pros. I get it. I mean, we got a 5 times telephoto lens coming for the first time. We got A17 Pro processor, faster USB-C and recording to external SSDs. Like, it's crazy. There's a lot of cool stuff there. But in terms of the phone that a lot of people are going to be getting, this is a big upgrade. I mean, going from the iPhone 14 to an iPhone 15. I'm not saying you need to upgrade from a 14 to a 15, but just in terms of what these phones are offering, the iPhone 15 has a lot going for it. We're talking about a big improvement on that main camera sensor, as well as the 2 times telephoto style lens. We also have the new portrait live photo effects that are really cool. We have a smaller bezel on the front, and of course the dynamic island. We've got USB-C to replace Lightning. I love the new design, performance improvements with that A16 Bionic processor, brighter screen. I mean, just overall, this is a nice upgrade for the entry-level phones. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think the iPhone 15 is a good upgrade, or do you think Apple kind of phoned it in this year? No pun intended. But let me know down below in the comments or on Twitter at Andrew_OSU or on Threads at Andrew O'Hara 941. Otherwise, stay tuned. Got a lot more videos coming your way.